One of the most famous stories that gets brought up around Halloween is Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and one of the most unforgettable images from this tale is that of the Headless Horseman holding a pumpkin as he gives chase after a schoolteacher named Ichabod Crane. This spirit, the ghost of a Hessian writer, was said to be inspired by similar tales Irving heard while in Europe. He then put pen to paper and created his own story involving this ghostly being, setting it in Tarrytown, New York. I recently read Irving's original story, and what's interesting is the structure of it. Most of the legend of Sleepy Hollow introduces Ichabod Crane and allows us to get to know who he is. A recent arrival in Sleepy Hollow, New York from Connecticut, Ichabod is portrayed as having a massive appetite and a fascination for scary stories. He hears some of the older townsfolk talk about the Headless Horseman and his nightly rides. Ichabod is shown as interested in Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter of a wealthy landowner in Sleepy Hollow, who he dreams of wedding and inheriting the Van Tassel estate. His main rival for her hand is Brom Bones, with the two often competing for her affections. One night after a party, he rides off and comes across the Headless Horseman and his horse. A chase begins and Ichabod attempts to make it across the bridge. However, the horseman supposedly catches up to him and Ichabod disappears. Irving purposely made the ending ambiguous, offering multiple hints at the resolution. It's possible he really was greeted by this dead soldier with no head and was killed, or that he wasn't killed and ran off to live in another town without any spooky residents. The story also hints at the possibility of Bones putting on a disguise to scare Ichabod away. Reading The Legend of Sleepy Hollow for the first time, I was struck by how Irving described the details, and in particular the Dutch immigrants who resided in New York at the time and brought many of their own traditions to America. It's easy to see why the story had a strong impact, and multiple adaptations have been made over the years, some of which I will highlight. The earliest surviving screen adaptation is the 1922 silent film The Headless Horseman. It's a fascinating interpretation of the story, although it does take an odd detour when the townsfolk accuse Ichabod of witchcraft. It was actually filmed near Tarrytown, and the special effects used to create the Headless Horseman aren't half bad for a movie made almost 100 years ago. The chase is the standout scene of the film, although the filmmakers decided to go with the idea that it was Bones pulling a prank the entire time. The most famous adaptation is definitely the animated Disney version, released as part of the 1949 film The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. It stays largely faithful to the original story, and particularly emphasizes Ichabod's dreams of marrying Katrina more for food and fortune than for a personality or out of genuine love. The Headless Horseman is animated with plenty of intensity, and they even gave him a booming laugh as he chases after Ichabod. The animation allowed the artist the creativity to heighten the physical aspect of the chase, with Ichabod coming into close contact with the horseman at a number of points. Most might expect Disney to put a tidy bow on the ending, but the filmmakers actually stuck with the ambiguous conclusion of Irving's story, which I admire. Another popular version is Tim Burton's 1999 film Sleepy Hollow, which altered the story in several areas. For one, the movie is formatted like a murder mystery, with Ichabod being a police constable who is assigned to go to Sleepy Hollow and figure out who keeps decapitating people. There's also a lot more witchcraft and magic in this adaptation, along with finding out more about Ichabod's childhood. Burton made the movie as an homage to Hammer horror films, with multiple buckets of blood, and he turned it into a fun ride. When we see the horseman with his head, he's played by Christopher Walken, who probably was not most people's first choice for the role. Walken is known for his distinct speaking style, and even in his pre-Headless days, he only growls. However, Walken pulls it off, as he gives off a strange fascination of chopping soldiers' heads off during the war. For the scenes where he's headless, Ray Park took on the role, with modern special effects doing the rest to make his appearance extra chilling. I mentioned a few of the big-screen Sleepy Hollow adaptations, but there have been a lot of ones produced for television as well. Wishbone had an episode where our favorite book-reading dog imagined himself in the role of Ichabod. The first episode of Shelley Duvall's storybook series, Tall Tales and Legends, adapted the story too, and there was a made-for-television movie that aired on NBC in 1980, which had Jeff Goldblum playing Ichabod. One animated special I happened across was titled The New Misadventures of Ichabod Crane, produced by the Canadian animation studio Atkinson Film Arts, which would later work on the Raccoons. Airing on CBC in 1979, it's certainly an unusual special that is more inspired by Irving's story rather than a straight adaptation. The Headless Horseman is revealed to be an illusion created by a witch, and Ichabod sets off to try and stop her. He's also joined on his quest by Rip Van Winkle, another famous Washington Irving character. Ichabod eventually gets a hold of the witch's spellbook, which allows him to transform into the horseman. It's certainly a creative special, I'll give it that. There was an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which recast the legend of Sleepy Hollow with modern-day teenagers. Titled The Tale of the Midnight Ride, it parallels Irving's story, with the teens even having similar names, as Ian moves into town, and both him and Brad fight for Katie's affections. They eventually come across the real Headless Horseman, and even Ichabod Crane himself comes riding in. Despite a few tweaks here and there, I'm a little surprised the storyteller was allowed into the Midnight Society for clearly ripping off an already existing tale. For a couple of youngsters who love telling stories around a campfire, they have a surprising lack of awareness of classic literature. More recently, there was the animated short Legend of Smurfy Hollow, which featured those blue beings going up against the Headless Horseman. The title might have you expect this to be another adaptation, just with Smurfs. However, the folks at Sony Animation instead created an original story, the animators doing a lovely job of portraying the autumn season. In this delightful short, the horseman chases after the Smurfs, who wind up at a similar bridge from Irving's story. Gargamel also encounters him and makes the mistake of mocking the spirit. In the end, this proved to be an excellent charmer that's a fitting watch for the Halloween season. Then there was the television series Sleepy Hollow, which ran on Fox for 4 seasons. In preparation for this video, I watched the first episode, which provided a solid introduction for this new incarnation. In the show, Ichabod is a soldier in the Revolutionary War working for George Washington, and he's actually the one responsible for chopping off the horseman's head. Through the use of magic, Ichabod wakes up in present-day Sleepy Hollow, and so does the Headless Horseman, who does not waste time in decapitating anyone he comes across. Like I said, I've only seen the pilot, so I can't comment on the series as a whole, but I can understand why I developed a following. Reading Washington Irving's classic story, and watching or revisiting the various versions over the years, it's easy to see why it's resonated. Even the story's inspiration of North Tarrytown officially changed its name to Sleepy Hollow in 1996, in honor of its lasting legacy. Just remember, if you wind up lost there by horse, I would suggest galloping a little quicker in order to reach the bridge and avoid the Headless Horseman and his deadly pumpkin. See you next time.